of hagiography, of a saint in the making, one of those dirty saints with the cigs, the booze, the women. I suppose if Bowden hadn't written a shelf of nonfiction whose fierce ambition is unequaled in American not-so-belles lettres, we'd call him a barfly and be done with it. But he did write those books that are all one, continuous as a dream, laying out a tragic vision that's so noble and so singularly dedicated in its will to truth that it feels sacrificial. But before getting into all that, a curious fact from the obits did catch my eye, that Bowden walked out in the middle of the defense of his doctoral dissertation, ditching on the whole deal. This would certainly suggest a man who had the willingness and nerve to work without a net. Who does that? And don't we love him instantly? In giving up pedigree, you also forego easy passage, perhaps for a lifetime. And at the height of the 60s, when demonstrations and protests were social, Bowden's was the boycott of a man who would go it alone. Never a normal life for me. By the early 70s, he'd bailed on academe entirely, and, to my knowledge, never taught again. Truly a freelance all his days, a condition he described in a bio for an early book as a free ticket to the asylum. These days, the civic art of rhetoric plays out in arenas a little less august than in Cicero's time, but our citizenship is still as powerfully shaped by rhythm and sound as it was in the heyday of the Roman Senate. With Charles Bowden, you have to go to the likes of Abraham Lincoln or Woody Guthrie or Kendrick Lamar to find people who make as cool of a beat out of what is otherwise public discourse. Put the matter of Guthrie's hard traveling or Lamar's DNA in the mouth of a politician or social worker or professor or anyone you believe is in the business of persuasion, and the appeal will likely come off as dull, preachy, obvious, ordinary, forgettable. A sing-along might fare a little better, particularly in the case of Guthrie, but rote recitation won't work at all, and in either case, I doubt we'd ask for an encore. Stripped of its music, even the truth doesn't sound all that true, and the ancients knew. The truth of sound seems to travel on a lower frequency than sense, and it's all those unheard melodies that endear soul to soul. Crucially, sound is where art enters nonfiction, where discourse that aspires to the condition of art makes its claim to something more than ephemera, becoming news that stays news, as Ezra Pound put it. It also distinguishes art from the article, and the editors at the Tucson Citizen must have heard the truth in Bowden's early pieces, or they wouldn't have printed such ghastly material in a daily paper. I can only get started writing if I think it is music. That way I beat back my own cowardice. Often a poet or essayist will own a pet word or two, taking the language private, inflecting it for his own expressive needs, and coward seems to belong to Bowden in much the same way wicked belongs to James Baldwin. He has something specific in mind, but it's hard to say what exactly. By all accounts, including his own, Bowden led a bold and reckless life, full of audacious moves, and his field research exposed him to constant levels of risk that, unrelieved, likely kept a staggering volume of cortisol flowing to his brain. His was a life that exhibited a certain amount of fortitude, it would seem. A further complication here is that Bowden's talking about writing, about sitting at a desk and putting words on a piece of paper, not the sort of inconsistencies, the derelictions and abandonments more commonly associated with cowardice. That music is brave when we're not is hardly a case that needs making, not for anyone familiar with the military cadence or the spiritual or the sea shanty, but the writer is quietly alone in his work, not marching in formation or calling across a field or shouting at sea. It's possible that the writer alone at his desk is less alone in the company of a voice, and maybe that mix of rhythm and sound, the solace of a soloist, is a way of playing in unison, no different than a gang of Gandhi dancers mauling spikes to the beat of a railroad chant, the once familiar voice of manual labor in America, before machines took over the jobs and silenced work songs.